Um, this one is more, so who has been working with polyfills here already? Anybody? Great, okay. That's perfect, you're in the right place. If you have already built like 3-4 polyfills and just wanted to be here, I would have recommended you find some other nicer talk elsewhere, because this is a downright basic. It is not a very super advanced session. It is in fact really, really basic, something that anybody who is starting out with modern web development needs to understand. So I've kept it at that level, and this probably wouldn't even last 60 minutes. This should be probably done by about 45 minutes, and we can keep it, if you guys prefer, we can keep it for asking questions or figuring out things. So this is, yeah. So for the people who came newly for this talk, my name is Harish. I'm a front-end architect at this company called Myntra.com, taking care of most of the front-end initiatives there. I also moonwalk as a musician for a band called Agam, and well, that's where I tweet. It's Sivaram, and I'm a nice guy, so that's that. The problem that we are trying to solve is browser fragmentation. Anybody encountering that in day-to-day life today? If you're not encountering browser fragmentation, you're not doing anything for the browser. Because it is as fragmented can be. These days people use examples of fragmentations by quoting browsers. There are so many of them. There are so many devices today. There are so many versions of the same browser running across machines. So browser fragmentation is a big problem. And why is browser fragmentation a big problem? It is primarily, earlier we used to worry only about backward compatibility. Correct? No, I am on browser A, and I move to the next version, and I want to assure that my application or my website works in the previous version of the browser. But as the browsers themselves exploded, it started becoming that there are 4 modern browsers, each one of them having different levels of feature parity and maturity, and you want to be able to support your application on all the 4. And then multiply that 4 by a factor, which actually gives you the general picture of the fragmentation. Let's take a small example, right? No, in reality. Why don't you see my cool new video? Everybody knows about the HTML5 video tag. What was the popular choice of showing video before the HTML5 video came? Flash. And suddenly, Flash is a thing of past mostly. Everybody is saying, see, I used to work as a Flash engineer for a very long time, and I was part of that scheme of life when saying Flash itself would actually put your career in jeopardy. Oh, you are still using Flash, or you are the primitive old, oh, you didn't know about HTML5 video. But in reality, I have an old browser. That is, one simply does not use HTML5 video. That is only if you have friends who are all using modern Chrome, Firefox, and assorted browsers. Otherwise, it is not that simple. This is the primary. I said video because we all watch videos. Like, all of us do watch videos. I somehow think that 60 to 70% of our time in the office is actually on YouTube. And the other 20 is on Quora, and maybe another 15 is on Facebook. That's already 105%. So when do we work? That's the reality about my life. I spend a lot of time on those. So that is the reason why we are going to speak about a concept called a polyfill. I'm a big Vijaykanth fan. Our superheroes are different from their superheroes. He's one of them. I had to scale down that picture. A full-size picture will need a cinema 3D screen. It won't fit into this projector. So polyfill is actually a fashionable word for what we used to call as fallback. So what is a fallback? Can someone tell me what's a fallback? See, I don't have, it's like this, right? Like, you wanted to watch a movie in PVR Gold Class, but heck, it's sold out. Now the next option is to check the classic cinemas, or you head over to Urvashi. That's a classic fallback. When you fall back, your experience changes. See, how you would have watched the movie in gold class is different from how you would have seen it in a PVR Classic, will be very different from how you would have seen it in a single screen movie. So the biggest challenge about fallbacks was that there is no guarantee that your fallback experience would be the same as what you would have gotten if you hadn't had. That is why polyfills are a little different from fallbacks. So polyfill, there is a dictionary definition, I'll pull that up in a second, but polyfill is a concept that will allow you to experience something which your browser currently do not support, but will appear as if it is supported. So we are not saying HTML video is not supported, so please close this browser, go and open another browser that supports HTML5 video. That is called falling back, like, I didn't support. So here, or the other one is saying, like, currently I don't support HTML5 video, click this link and do something else. The third one is saying, I am not telling you whether you have HTML5 or not, you will get to see a video. That is the last one that I articulated. That is a practical example of a polyfill. So when you are a web developer, when you're engineering polyfills, your aspiration or your promise to your developer is that promise to your user, promise to your consumer is that I am not going to ask you questions like, do you have a modern browser? Do you have XYZ properties supported? Instead, I am going to figure out that innately and give you the best possible experience within my capabilities. And that is what a polyfill expects to solve. Polyfill or a polyfiller is a piece of code or a plugin that provides the technology that you, the developer, expect the browser to provide natively, flattening the API landscape, if you will. So I, as a developer, want everybody to watch HTML5 videos. But heck, if HTML5 video is not supported, I'm going to provide you with an interface which will fall back to whatever is appropriate, like Flash maybe, or a different codec maybe, or whatnot. And that is what the expectation of a polyfill is. So now, do all of us understand what a polyfill is? Considering the fact that some of us said we hadn't heard about it in the past. Any questions until this point? Sure, great. So that is objective 1 of my talk, to tell whoever is in here there's a concept called polyfilling. And let's move on. There is another smooth toy called a shim. Anybody's heard about what a shim is? So shim is a little more uber than a polyfill. The example is, a polyfill is always written for a real feature. See, when we say HTML5 video, it is part of the spec. And the W3C has called out that this is how somebody should write a video tag. Now what happens is, the browser vendors, they have a plan. See, today XYZ browsers support it. The ABC browsers don't support them yet, but when they support them, they will stick to the spec. That is the expectation. That is what is known as a signed off feature. So I might not be supporting it today, but I will definitely support it tomorrow. So when you write polyfills, you always write polyfills adhering to a spec. So you will not change the syntax, you will not change the API landscape, you will keep everything intact and provide a custom implementation, so that when that browser innately starts supporting the feature, you can throw the polyfill away. So when you are writing a polyfill, it is very important that you don't change anything that the spec calls it out. If you do that, when the browser implements it, you are going to rewrite a lot of code. Or when in the meanwhile, shim is like a sort of a free for all thingy. Like, like how, anybody heard of WebRTC? So WebRTC is still not signed off. Like, nobody knows if real-time communication using WebRTC will become a W3C spec. Is not something which we know today. But Chrome provides an implementation for WebRTC. And Chrome has invented its own APIs. There are its own set of things that you do. That is a classic example of a browser implementing a shim. See, it's like, this is my implementation of WebRTC. Tomorrow the spec changes, I am not responsible. But today, you can use it. So that is a shim. They provide an API to feature that is not supported, but necessarily not stick to a spec, and it typically provides you a lot of things because there is no contract, right? So you can do a lot more things with a shim. While in a polyfill, you typically expect to provide only what that API spec expects you to do. Any questions? Please ask them, because it's a relatively new concept, so happy to answer questions. So difference between a polyfill and shim is understood. So whenever tomorrow,
the only difference between them is one is signed off features, another is your own.
Signed off is one aspect of it. Whether signed off or not, a polyfill is expected to provide an experience what the browser is supposed to provide natively. While a classic example of a shim, I'll tell you. You can create, there's a slider. You can say input type is equal to slider in HTML5. A lot of browsers don't implement it. Now that input type is slider, if you write a polyfill, it only does what the slider does. But if you're writing a shim, you can have a slider with multiple drag points. Or you can create a slider that dispatches custom events. While if you're writing a polyfill, you will only write the click and change event so that tomorrow you can gracefully remove that and none of your code changes. So you will write add event listeners. See, if you write a polyfill which actually has custom event types tomorrow, you remove the polyfill, all your business logic will die. Correct. So it's important that, see, what do you call a polyfill and what do you call a shim? See, both are written by you, but there is an innate difference between them. So that is what I'm trying to call out in that. Was that okay? Yeah. Great. What are the key considerations while choosing a polyfill? Any guesses? Why do we choose a polyfill to start with? We have been speaking about polyfills. Can anybody tell me why do we ever have to choose a polyfill? Excellent. So the older browsers don't provide what we need. So sometimes what happens is, see, we have what is known as the browser detection JavaScript code. I promise you all of us have written that, right? On top of the page, you will say if the user agent is of a particular type. Considering we have been doing that for years, you don't really need a polyfill. All you need to do is do a browser detection on top and redirect to another page. Big deal, ain't it? But what happens is you fall into this trap of multiple code bases, multiple implementations, and there is really no moving forward. Whenever you want to move forward, you are moving forward in 3 different places or maybe 4 different places. Correct, which was the problem with user agent detection. Now with mobile devices, the user agent detection is broken because different device vendors tend to give you the same name. See, for example, the Android browser on a Samsung Galaxy Y and a Samsung Galaxy Note will both tell that Android default browsers. But I promise you, they're not the same. Both of them have very different capabilities. But considering Samsung as a vendor, he simply said, hey, this is the same browser. Go figure. So user agent detection in modern times is broken. So that is one. So you can't even do that. See, earlier we were at least able to maintain multiple copies of the same page by giving this. Number 2, HTML5 has a lot to do with semantics. See, earlier every tag that you write, other than the tables and the paragraphs and the branches, everything had boiled down to a div, correct? We all write divs, give them IDs and work with them. But with HTML5, we got new meaningful tags like a section, an article, and we have even more complex things like data lists, pick lists, and things like that. So what happens is, just because your browser does not support the section tag, are you going to write another HTML page which uses divs? You're not, right? Will that model scale? You write a page with the modern semantic HTML5 tags. Then you run it on an older browser, that browser doesn't understand it. What is your solution? Are you saying, since it is the old browsers don't support it, I'm going to do a browser detection and redirect them to a page which does not use the modern HTML syntax is one approach. Or the other one is saying, let us not bother. For the browsers that understand the new HTML syntax will show it. For the rest of them, I will add a piece of code which will parse that HTML and change it to something that the browser understands, the older browser understands. That is called polyfilling. So that when you open the same web page, the polyfill figures out whether the browser innately supports this or not. Do you understand the difference between? And so for all this to work, anybody heard about what is modernizer? So modernizer does something called feature detection. Actually, modernizer does not do feature detection. The HTML runtime as of JavaScript runtime does feature detection. You can simply do window dot a feature, it will return a true or false. But what really happens is when you do that and you have to write a code for like about 200 features, you have an ugly piece of code sitting for you which you have to keep on adding. So modernizer sort of abstracts that and he checks for a particular feature existing and gives you a Boolean back. There's something called yep no earlier, which actually does the same thing, so on and so forth. So when I answer this, it'll be a little more. Oh, sorry. The key considerations while choosing a polyfill or choosing to polyfill itself is, does it do the job for you? See, usually from my experience, I have been working in this space for quite some time and I have written a bunch of polyfills myself. So you don't always have to polyfill, because the polyfills are needed only if it does what is needed for you. For example, video is a classic example where you would want to. Sometimes you would just change the UI pattern. For example, I want to put a slider. There are multiple ways of doing a slider. You don't have to necessarily polyfill for that. The second one is it reliable and cross-browser? How do you know the reliability of a polyfill? Unfortunately, you have to try it. That's the only way that you know it is reliable. So it is very important that you actually go and choose a polyfill that is fairly reliable. How many people are using it? Who is the developer? Before that, this session is going to be like this, because it is an introduction to a concept. It is not going to give shock and awe. The demos are also going to be fairly mundane and trivial, so you have to bear with me for that, but it's important that we know what's happening here. Does an API adhere to the spec? You created a polyfill and he has written random methods and random APIs. That polyfill is not right for you. But all these three is very tame. What is very important is this. Are you ready to maintain it if it comes to it? Let's say Harish wrote a nice little polyfill for something and I moved jobs. I'm not doing JavaScript anymore. I don't really care. But you decided to use a polyfill. Will you be able to maintain it? It is very critical that you take that call into consideration if you're actually polyfilling for your applications, right? That's why it is sometimes called regressive enhancements. We always knew about progressive enhancement. Polyfilling is actually the opposite of that. You are sort of going back in time. You are actually taking something and regressively trying to make it available for people across board, right? So the challenge with anything that is regressive is that you have to put that extra attention and care to be able to make it work for all users. Is there a question? Sure.
When you call it something like defensive programming, where you end up doing polyfills to something that you think all the time like this should need a polyfill, or are you approaching somewhere to defensive programming?
So here is the question. That's an interesting question. I like the usage as well. Defensive programming. That's pretty interesting. So polyfilling came into existence for the following reason. See, everybody wanted to push semantic web forward. Everybody wanted to push that everything should eventually move to HTML5. Everybody should start writing HTML5, and that straight away ran into a wall because HTML5 is only a concept. See, it's a buzzword, but in reality, it is just a bunch of new tags and a bunch of new JavaScript and a bunch of new CSS. And the browsers gave no commitment as to how you will do it. But the other side of the world started arguing we will never move forward unless we adopt CSS3, HTML5, and modern JavaScript. So how do we solve this? So that is when a bunch of guys at Google themselves, like people like Remy Sharp, Paul Irish, they all came up and said, whatever we believe is definitely the step forward. See, we all know today or tomorrow or at least like 5 months from now, every browser will implement Canvas. See, that is a faith we all have. Do we say the same thing about WebRTC? No. We don't know. So anything that we believe is going to happen in the future, it is worth polyfilling. Because then you don't write separate markup or separate code for it. You've already written for future. And then you are regressively proofing it backwards. You don't have it today. It's like life insurance in certain ways. Like, you typically, see, we all know we're going to die one day. So that is the deal, right? So sometimes we don't treat, let's say, a less involved category of insurance like that. That's not going to happen. So we are pretty sure that I'm not going to fall ill. So most of the people don't take medical insurance, but many of us actually take life insurance. You can take that analog here. So you typically know that these features are going to come. This is going to happen. It is impending. So proof it backwards. So that is where you polyfill. Excuse me. Excuse me. Right. going to show you a demo of a context menu polyfill. What is a context menu? Right click. So if you right click on the browser today, what happens? It shows the browser's context menu. So in HTML5 spec, it is proposed that you be able to create custom context menus on right click. Basically suppress the browser's context menu and show your own context menu. Now let us go back to here. This is a website called Can I Use? Anybody has seen this? If you haven't seen it, you should definitely go look at it. CanIUse.com tells you what particular feature of HTML5 is currently supported across some of the commonly used browsers. So if you look at here, Chrome, if you see I'm using Chrome. So if you see here, red color actually means not supported. So Chrome 25 and 26 does not support it. And the subsequent ones, the support is unknown. So this is a classic example of a place where we are just hoping that this will eventually come to this browser, but it's not currently supported. So let us just go here. Let me see. So this is the most, as you see, there are so many people who have written polyfills for that. So let me just open this and you'll see. So this is an HTML5 polyfill for context menu. So he is saying right click here. See that? It throws open a custom context menu. Now let us go down and see the markup. See. This is standard HTML5. What I've highlighted. This code is not specific to this polyfill. When HTML5 supports context menu, that is how you will write your markup. Right? So in future, when context menus become a reality, that will be your markup. But today, that's not supported. So what you do is you polyfill it by writing your own implementation so that today it works, and at the end of the day when HTML5 natively starts implementing it, all you need to do is do a feature detection. Modernizer dot context menu, if it returns true, don't use a polyfill. Modernizer dot context menu returns false, use this jQuery library. Do you get the drift? So that is the idea of writing a polyfill. So if you hadn't done that, what you will end up doing is you will write your own custom markup over here, or your own JavaScript, or your own jQuery, which will actually mimic a polyfill, but that will break the day, or rather you will have hanging hairy code which you don't use anymore when the browser starts supporting it. So I can't state this, I can't state the obvious more and more times, but polyfilling is done so that your code is written for future. And you have certain gaps now which you're filling now, which is very important to know. So you are not polyfilling for future, you're polyfilling for present. The future is much brighter. The future, when the implementation comes in, you would not need it. So if you actually go to Modernizer's website, so this. So let me open this link. So this is in Modernizer's wiki page. So it actually gives you a set of implementations right now available for polyfilling. So there was a gentleman earlier who asked me, like, I have a canvas-based application. In my previous talk, he was there, he's not here right now. I have a canvas-based application, but I have to make it work on IE. What do I do? So there is something called Xcanvas. So how do you get Xcanvas working? Are you going to write a separate Xcanvas tag in your HTML, or are you going to polyfill it? So you're going to polyfill it. So that is the classic example of where you want. So there are several of them, right? There is SVG, there is Canvas. I'm particularly interested in one of them, which I'm going to take you through the whole distance and show you how it works. So this is my favorite. This is the simplest. So I'm going to open this and show you the end-to-end workflow of how this polyfill is written, right? So let us look at this. Can you see this at the back, or should I increase the size? Can you see it at the back? So you have an input type is equal to range, name is equal to text, minimum 100, maximum 300, value is equal to 150. Okay, this is HTML, right? Straight HTML5. But there are multiple browsers that support and don't support. The input type is range. So if you actually open it in Firefox, it works. If you actually open it in, if you open it in Chrome, it works. If you open it in Firefox, the implementation is patchy. Safari 6 minus sort of does not work at all. So what we have done over here is, you still put the HTML5 range input, and in the script tag, you are just saying whatever is of type range, that colon range actually points to type, convert that into a range input. So basically, let us now look at that jQuery library. Just hang on. So look at this. See, this is an example of going a little beyond what is supported. See, this is where that point crosses over between being a polyfill and being a shim. So now this actually starts talking about custom scroll bar for a div. A scroll bar is not really a slider. It is a slider, but it is also in certain ways not a slider. See this. So this is where a simple HTML5 concept has been extended to do things that is naturally not expected to do. So this is an example of an implementation that sort of sits between. So if you are just saying dot range input, it's a polyfill. But if you're actually doing multiple customization properties, it actually borders on a shim. But these guys pitch this range input is typically called and treated as a customized range, but it follows the polyfill pattern. So this is another. The flow player is a very interesting place to look at for interesting polyfill implementations. Now let us now look at a couple more concepts that we need to understand when we are actually writing polyfills. When do you know a polyfill needs to kick in?
When the feature is not supported.
When the feature is not supported. So every polyfilling venture that we do has to be preceded by a feature detection check. Do we all understand what feature detection is? So feature detection is a slightly more advanced alternative to user agent detection. See, user agent will only tell you what type of browser am I, but feature detection actually tells you what particular feature is supported. See, when you actually do a feature detection, for selective things you can polyfill, for selective things you can choose not to polyfill. So that is the beauty of doing feature detection prior to actually polyfilling. Sometimes what happens is you will throw in all the polyfills in one go when it is not needed. Some of them might not be needed to polyfill. And always remember that when you're polyfilling, you're adding weight to your page. It has to bring down extra JavaScript to be able to do things which it shouldn't have required. So polyfills are also a boon and bane depending upon how you're doing it. So irrationally throwing in regressive implementations just because it's available will actually make your web page work much slower. So it's important that we always do feature detection before we start. And before we go there, not this one. This is where I'll spend the next few minutes. This is a very, very interesting library called WebShms. Anybody heard about it? So let me just show you. So this is where I would imagine all of us who are wanting to write polyfills, want to do polyfills, use polyfills should get to. So let me pull up that website. The beauty of it is free, open source, open to contribute, costs nothing, not even a penny. So that way it is again beautiful. Whenever I show stuff like this, I am in no way connected with these products, nor do I endorse them, nor do I get paid for endorsing them. I am just throwing this open to you guys that we can all collectively benefit. So if you don't want to use WebShms, you are free to do that. So before you throw that question to me, why should I use WebShms? You don't have to. But I think it is really cool. It is free and it doesn't hurt to use something which is really nice. So what is beautiful about WebShms is that, can you see this code? This code should be self-explanatory. So WebShms abstracts all popular polyfills available today. They have taken it and vetted it. So in the top of your page, you can simply say $.webshims.polyfill. It will actually attach all the polyfills applicable today for HTML and make it available for your page. And it also has selective loading. See, if you can say WebShms.polyfill, say I want only forms and JSON storage, you just pass those two as strings and you get polyfills for them, and remaining of them will not be loaded for you. So this is the largest challenge while working with polyfills, because your code will start looking ugly, because you will have modernizer check, polyfill, modernizer check, polyfill, modernizer check, polyfill, and that's how it moves forward. So if you actually use a single library like WebShms, which is capable of actually abstracting what polyfills to load, your code starts looking much cleaner. This is probably the first part, but this is brilliant, right? Work when the polyfills are ready. The biggest challenge with polyfills is that it actually puts load on your own load time. I don't know how many of us are into performance engineering. The more and more code that you're adding at on load for your page to work, the slower your page is going to work. So it is important to fire polyfills and be ready to use them and be able to treat them asynchronously is very important. So WebShms as a library, I've become a big fan of this. I learned about this only like a month and a half ago, and I'm completely bought into this because it actually allows you to time and control when your polyfill is firing in. So you can see something like this, WebShms.ready DOM canvas, work with canvas in the document. Till that point your page will not be blocked, because it is not put, if you are actually linking a polyfill directly, it will be on load, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. It has to be on load, otherwise you wouldn't know. Right? If it is not on load, you will not be able to access any of the variables, you will start getting runtime exceptions. So WebShms sort of lets you do that. The other one is, yeah, this is brilliant. So it has got something called WebShms.extend native. So it actually adds progressive enhancements on top of something which is partially natively supported. So it is not recreating everything from ground up, it is actually adding on top of something which is natively supported. Again, something which is good to see. Look at this. This is, use Flash Canvas instead. That's all you need to do. You actually put a set options and say which is the type of canvas shim that you want to use. So that's pretty nice. And conditional calling, I already mentioned that. If you're actually using polyfills without an abstraction library like this, you will not be able to conditionally call your polyfills, and dependency management will be extremely difficult. Sometimes one polyfill will be required for another polyfill to work. So dependency management is very critical when you're actually trying to polyfill backwards. That's another interesting thing. So look at this. If not modernizer.input.placeholder, then only load your polyfill. So it is very interesting too. And the final thing is, this is awesome. You can actually choose from right here in terms of what are the polyfills you want to include in your build library. You can select them, and your WebShms library will give you only what is needed. So in reality, you're not going to search around for what polyfills do you have and whatnot. And finally, for the geeks who are already ready for this, you can write a new feature implementation and it works perfectly fine with WebShms. Tomorrow, you are a JavaScript person and you wanted to write a custom polyfill for a feature that does not exist. You can simply say WebShms.add polyfills, magic method, and you can say window.that function, and the polyfills start kicking in. How many of us are core JavaScript programmers here? I just want to see how many people who are like, you see the value of this, I hope, because attaching window properties and have a polyfill kick in directly is a very, very big problem today. And not just for polyfills. If you imagine, that is why, jQuery or any library you're using, they will all be written as self-executing functions, correct? It is done that because by the time your window.onload is fired, the window.jQuery property is available. Imagine you having to write each and every polyfill as a self-executing function. You can only imagine what is the load that you're going to put for a bunch of libraries that to add, get executed, and then get appended to the window property. It gets really hard from a performance engineering point of view. So it is pretty cool that they have implemented it in this fashion. Please go and look at it. Just go and search for WebShim on Google, and you will actually get this link, and highly recommend it that you take a look at it. And these are some of those brilliant implementations of session storage and local storage, which a lot of people are using. If you're building mobile applications, hybrid mobile applications, this will actually work across board. You don't have to bother how a particular browser implements session storage or local storage. So it is pretty cool. So maybe a good place to look at. And great, I have another 5 to 7 minutes worth of content. Just a bunch of words of caution for people who are actually getting into polyfilling business. Polyfills are useful only for unit components. Never ever polyfill for something that solves 5 different problems. Polyfills should always be unit level. See, a range polyfill should not also solve date picking. See, for example, if you are doing a range polyfilling, make sure that your polyfill only solves that one problem. It is important because tomorrow you will be able to do selective removal. If you are actually having one polyfill that takes care of 20 different things, you will not know which piece of code to comment out or which piece of code to not use when a feature actually comes a reality in a browser implementation. Number 2, if you are actually having polyfills that have third-party library dependency, be very cautious that that library is something which has got a reasonably good shelf life. Writing a polyfill using jQuery is a good idea. Writing a polyfill using Angular.js, maybe not so much, because we don't exactly know what is going to be the life of, because jQuery has somehow gotten established as something which everybody uses, everybody wants to use, so it is fine using jQuery as a basis for your shim or a polyfill. But if there is some sweet new toy that has come into place and you have decided to write your polyfill based on that, be aware that you might not be able to maintain it or you might not be able to keep that. Third, please make sure that your polyfills don't kill your page. There are a lot of polyfills which is already available there, which simply disrupts your page because it is doing crazy DOM parsing. It is going all throughout the DOM tree to find out, what is the particular DOM element that is available. Should I polyfill? Should I not polyfill? It is very important to understand polyfills are expected to solve a problem, not increase a classic example is ID-based polyfilling. See, in the range input, if you saw, it was type-based. A lot of people do ID and class-based polyfilling. You create a div element and give it a class called I have to be polyfilled, and next one developer comes and randomly uses that class attribute across. Your polyfill start kicking in for all elements which should not be required to polyfill. So that's another example. These are for people who are wanting to write polyfills. If you're going to be a person who is just going to use what is available, ignore what I'm saying right now. This is the time to check Facebook. But if you're going to write polyfills, please remember that it is very important that you apply them only to write things. Please, I can't state this enough. Please, please, please do not polyfill based on user agent. Please do polyfilling only based on features. Please don't throw in a polyfill and say, okay, for all Mozilla-based browsers, all Gecko-based browsers, I'm going to polyfill. Is a very, very wrong thing to do. You will unnecessarily make your page work really, really slow because you understand how the browser works, right? So it is going to interpret the HTML. It already has converted things that doesn't need a polyfill. Then you are going to go one more iteration to the DOM tree and then convert it to something which is inherently was not required to be polyfill. So it's very important to feature detect before you start putting. Whenever you are writing a shim, abstract out the shimminess of your polyfill so that can be easily detached. Do not throw shim and polyfill specific code into a same class so that they start mudding up with. See, for example, your polyfill might be dispatching an item click event, and tomorrow the browser will also implement an item click event. And who's going to do the conflict management? Is the event going to fire twice? So please be very cautious that you are not implementing things that conflict. Write only events that conflict with the browser into the polyfill and not into the shim. And finally, test out, do progressive enhancement to your polyfill, and please be sure that your polyfills are added to the page in a way that they can be removed. So please use dependency management based frameworks if you're polyfilling. I know a lot of us have closure compilers and gzipping mechanisms which actually concatenate all your JavaScript files into a single file and reference it right on top. Very, very wrong thing to do when you're polyfilling. When you're polyfilling, please have an approach where you have a dependency management framework in place and you are actually knocking it off the dependency management chain when the polyfill is not required, so that even if you're gzipping, you only gzip what is required. Otherwise, even when the feature is implemented, you will have a bunch of polyfill code in your gzip file sitting over there. And finally, use a library called PrefixFree. I think it is 2 KB after it is minified. So PrefixFree is a library that progressively adds vendor-specific prefixes to your CSS based on which browser you are in. Otherwise, please write a simple piece of JavaScript which actually adds the prefixes at runtime. Never ever write -ms, -o, -webkit kind of CSS when you're actually polyfilling. It is a very wrong thing to do. Always only write what the HTML5 spec says, because the browser and vendor prefixes are a thing of today. They're going to go away the day those things become a reality. Any questions on that? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Today, when we write cross-browser CSS, we will write, for example, box shadow, we will replicate it 4 times. Box -shadow, -webkit -box -shadow, -moz -webkit box shadow, -o box shadow. That's how we write our CSS. Very, very wrong thing to do when you're writing polyfills. Don't write your CSS for a polyfill like that. Add your browser specific prefix at runtime, either using the PrefixFree library or write a small little JavaScript code at the top of your polyfill, which will add your CSS prefixes depending upon which browser you are running or which feature you are running based on feature detection. Please, this is very important, or at the end of the session, we will all end up writing polyfills, which actually does much more damage than probably doing a browser sniffing and redirecting. So it's very important that you keep these parameters in mind. Please check Paul Irish's blog. Paul Irish is a alpha JavaScript geek. He's an evangelist at Google, and he is the most authoritative resource when it comes to polyfilling and shimming. Remy Sharp is the other person whom to follow to see what is happening in the shimming polyfilling world, and start using it in your applications and start building more semantically concurrent modern applications. And before I close, yeah, I was right, it took 45 minutes as opposed to 60 minutes. So I had content only for 45 minutes. I can take questions now. Before that, wholeheartedly thank for having come to this session. It is one of those new babies in the web scheme, and I can promise you very soon a lot of people will be wanting you to start using shims and polyfills. I work for an e-commerce company called Myntra.com. This has become a paramount deal for us because we have to support all sorts of browsers and devices, because the more people buy, the more money that we make. So I think I can speak in a very candid, wholehearted manner that without polyfilling, our business is going to suffer. So we have already started investing in that. So if anybody from the retail e-commerce zone, you'll be feeling the heat already. Probably enterprises will feel a little later, but I can promise you, you guys are all going to see how you want to unify your markup in CSS and then use regressive enhancements or polyfilling to kind of solve the problem. So you will soon see yourself that you're not writing user agent sniffers anymore, and you'll be starting to write polyfilling. So please read more on this. This is only an introductory sneak into what this large concept is. It is still evolving, and whatever I said is only scratching the surface of what this concept is. Happy that I could speak to you guys, and feel free to read more. I think it's important that we start reading now and start experimenting with what is possible. And I think you'll be in a much happier place when you do that, in my opinion. At least that's what I've been realizing in my job. So hopefully you'll feel the same way, and you can buy me a beer later. That's the end of the talk. I can take questions. If there are no questions, it's a break after this. Feel free to head to the coffee place and have a nice rest of the day. Thank you so much.